Okay, so all of this has led to basically the creation of two separate Chinatowns in New York. Most major urban centers in the U.S. have a Chinatown, which is an area within the urban center where you will find Chinese stores, Chinese restaurants, different types of services geared towards the Chinese community in that region. New York's first Chinatown goes back to the mid 1800s, and most of the people there speak Cantonese because the first group of individuals, immigrants, and so forth, came from the Hong Kong area. Now, one of the things you need to understand with regard to China is really kind of, even though they're separate urban and rural regions, they're also kind of three separate geographical regions. So you have mainland China, you have Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was originally a British colony. And so the people in Hong Kong there was a lot more readily speaking English. They spoke Cantonese as their main language. They had all of that European money going in there, so they became the economic hub of that region. And so you have that aspect. Now you also have mainland China, and mainland China has major cities such as Shanghai and Beijing and so forth, but it also has very, very large rural farming areas, and the geography separates areas off fairly dramatically. You also have Taiwan, which is a separate island. In Taiwan, there's the contestation as to whether Taiwan is part of China or it's its own entity. Has kind of been a contest for years, but Taiwan has been able to kind of, in a sense, really kind of establish their own cultural independence, if not actual technical independence. They're much more connected to the West. They run much more like a cosmopolitan, modern economy than other parts of China and so forth. So they're, in a sense, kind of a very independent group. So this first group mainly came from Hong Kong and areas around there, so they mostly speak Cantonese, but you can see that that group's been there for a very, very long time. And with this group, you'll see some mixing of English. And I'm not going to try to say how to pronounce this term in Cantonese, but you can see, right, that term, you can see a couple of words that look Chinese, and you see a word that looks English. You know, translated in English, the statement means he is very handsome. But you can see that there's this combination of some English being mixed in with some Cantonese. Now, a second Chinatown evolved over the last 3 decades of the 20th century. And in this Chinatown, where the first one was in one area of the city, this was in another area of the city, in the Queens area. And most people there speak what the newer immigrants speak, which are either Mandarin or Taiwanese, or some people may speak some of those more rural dialects, but it's primarily Mandarin or Taiwanese. So you see, in a sense, there needed to be this development of these two different Chinatowns because culturally, linguistically, socially, there were two very different regional groups or actually more than two different, but different regions of immigrants from China. Now, for the Taiwanese area, for the second Chinatown, some refer to that as Taiwan Town because of the large percentage of Taiwanese that live in that area. So we talk about diversity here. We can think that most who came before 1965 built very tight personal and business networks. And those groups were very ethnocentric, they were very centered to each other, and they were faithful to their specific culture. Part of this is because they lacked the language skills to interact with Americans, right? And we can understand that there are power structures here. We can think of this discussion in the sense of these people are different in these ways, right? That's the anthropological perspective. But we start talking about, okay, well, what factors go into requiring, kind of leading to this difference and leading to the maintenance of this difference and those things. We can start moving into the cultural studies and the globalization understandings, right? The ethnic community for this group also offered convenient economic opportunities. So you could start up a store that sold Chinese stuff, and you had Chinese people there to sell it to. Also, now, when we think of a cultural studies perspective or globalization perspective, again, there were restrictive immigration laws which made it hard for entire families to immigrate. So men, even though they were fathers, even though they were husbands, many times had to immigrate on their own because there were very restrictive immigration laws. And again, we can think of that in the sense of what are the issues of power and social structure that lead to certain cultural experiences. In this case, the cultural experience of people having to leave their family behind when they immigrated. Now, as a result of all this stuff going on, certain regional organizations were developed, such thing as same last name associations and other associations where they could help the members of those associations with employment, legal disputes, social interaction, a number of different factors. So these organizations evolve to be able to deal with all of these other structures of power and society and culture that were, in fact, disadvantaging these individual immigrants. And these were legal immigrants in this case. Now, there are a number of undocumented immigrants that were of the more recent immigrants from China to this country. They must obviously negotiate legal concerns, right? They are undocumented so that they could be transported back or deported to their prior country and so forth. So they have to stay within their small groups for support and actual survival, right? To just even be able to make ends meet. Now, there are certain regional customs, and we talk about these regional customs in the next presentation.